So we talked about cheating, we talked about lying, we talked about lying versus being incorrect versus being dishonest. We talked about formats and contents, one of which is a meta-awareness topic, which I described as content, which isn't the most accurate. I was wrong, I was not lying. Alright, so let's talk about some distortions, because those are relative to communication. These are things that you should probably be aware of in general when you're communicating, when you're thinking about things, when you're doing things, when you're playing games, or doing any sort of social or thing involving another person. These are typically going to be things to know or be aware of, though not necessarily to always be aware of on top of your mind. You don't need to analyze every little thing. Like, is it this, is it this, is it this, is it this, is it that? You don't need to think of these as like a checklist to go down. But it might be very helpful to be aware of these things when you have conversations with like your partner or your friends, or if you're like playing a game. We'll go over like strawmans, we'll go over like shoulds, blame, self-blame and other blame. We'll go over like mind reading, we'll go over like false dilemmas, control fallacy, and oversimplification. And this list is just because those are all the ones I have like listed in my notes that I want to go over, or I wanted to at the very least. Really like this, but I think we're going capacity, and then we're just going like ability. So first, let's go with oversimplification. That is basically when you reduce a complicated issue or something with many aspects to like a single particular point. So for example, if we're all playing like this game and one person whiffs their ult last second on like the game winning or potentially game winning push, and then you lose the game because they fuck up their ult, an oversimplification would be like, yo, we only lost that game because that person fucked up their ult. Like, it's your fault we lost. That's relative to blame. We'll go over that next. But basically, it's oversimplification because the game is presumably going to be fairly long. It depends on the game. Like, it might be like a 20, 30 minute game. Overwatch, or comp, you might play, Rivals. Might be variations of like how long their matches. So basically, there's a lot of opportunity for expression while playing a game to do things better or differently that could have changed the outcome from a loss to a win. And besides you as an individual having the opportunity to change the way you play and the things you do, or to have done differently, not like the opportunity to go back in time and change, the enemy also have their own agency and they'll be able to do things differently, or they could have done things differently that would have made it more or less likely for you to win or lose. So it's weird to like oversimplify it down to like one specific and sole thing. Now that's not to say specific things might not have more or less impact than other things on whether or not you win or lose. But there's a very big difference in saying we lost because Wild Turtle, flashed here, versus, wow, we could have done like XYZ better. Our immediate cause for losing, or like the thing nearest to the end, was like Wild Turtle flashing over. Or like that was a bad thing that didn't help us win, or whatever the fuck, specific to it. I am thinking of a particular video from the past about like Reggie shitting on Wild Turtle, and like Chaox was like, yo bro, like that's not the only reason we lost. Or he was trying to express that. He actually said something like that's not why we lost, or whatever the fuck. And Reginald, the owner of TSM, at the time, I don't know about currently because I don't keep up, complete fucking garbage communicator. I am hyper judgmental of him for fanboy reasons and for fan hate reasons, I guess. But like, there's a lot that he definitely could have improved in like every single aspect of every single video I've ever seen of him. It is really rare for me to watch a video and go, yo, that guy's fucking professional, or that guy's like doing shit right. But that's not the point. My bad, I'm showing him, it's dumb. It's weird for me to judge him based on like fucking season 3, 4, whatever the fuck it was, based on standards from like future seasons and like different development rates and all that. My bad. Alright, it's silly of me to do that. I'm wrong to do that. I don't think he'll ever know that I said any of that. I don't think it'll hurt his feelings or have like any meaningful impact. But I still think it's generally wrong for me to do, and probably harms my own development to keep doing things like that. Anyways, moving on. Some oversimplification, how it's taking many things and reducing the fault or blame or whatever the fuck to one particular thing, when that might not be the only thing that could have been involved, and like not acknowledging other things could be harmful in different ways and shit like that. Whew, that is oversimplification in a nutshell. There are the control fallacy. This is where you say you have control of everything, you're in complete control, or like you had no control, there was nothing you could do. And this is really, really common amongst both my friend group, but also just in like League of Legends in general. I like both of these. Healing reduction, anti-heal is just nice. But range is sick. We'll go with that. I'll take those out. So else can get 10% power cooldown. We'll take them slower. Oh, that's and then my super nice. Right. So it's really popular in like League of Legends and other games to be like, there's absolutely nothing I could have done, and like pretend you have no fucking control. So it depends how meta or like generic you want to go with this, because technically you could just choose not to play the fucking game in the first place. Like at every point you could have made different decisions. So saying like there's nothing I could have done doesn't make sense. Like, I understand the communication is like I did my best, but like there's no way I could have done better or like to do a thing. Which is very different and also typically wrong. But I can sort of understand sentiment a lot better, a lot easier. When you say like, oh, there's nothing I can do, this also tends not to be the most accurate. But when people say this, they usually mean relative to a function. So although people say things that sound like this fallacy, for example, there's nothing I can do, there's usually like in parenthesis, there's nothing I could do to like beat this lane or or whatever the fuck. But often in video games, the goal is to just not beat that lane then. It is to go provide value other places. So for example, if you're top lane and you're getting shit on top lane, one way to get value is to stop the enemy jungler or fuck with them. Another way to get value is to gank mid or help your jungler or go take objectives. Or there's a bunch of other ways to try and get value or stop the enemy from getting value that aren't necessarily just continually going to lane and then dying. One thing that is generally really popular is the whole just fucking farm under turret. The issue with farm under turret, it is a absolutely fine perspective, but if it gets too bad, you won't be in a position where you can any longer farm under turret without just getting dove repeatedly. Also, it depends on how good you are farming under turret. Like, if you suck at last hitting under turret, it's probably not the greatest advice, you know? If you suck at, you know, killing shit under turret, not necessarily last hitting, but anyways, saying there's nothing you could do is usually very black and white fallacious thinking. There's usually things you can definitely do. There's also the consideration of you don't know what will or won't work necessarily without trying it. So one example would be Dead by Daylight. Something really popular for me is friendlying the killer. I tend to be not necessarily good at this, but it tends to work much more for me than other friends that I have because of the way I act in game and the things I do and the way I like communicate with the killer. I also have a generic awareness of certain circumstances that killers are more likely to friendly you if either you're, you know, low on gens and you're like the last person. If you're the last person, you're gonna be more likely than like if you're trying to friendly them when there's a bunch of people. If you do something funny, they're going to be significantly more likely to friendly you. I forgot to Q or B first. If you're funny and they find you entertaining or cute, more likely if you have like a name like hypes up or like glosses or glazes their fucking character or whatever the fuck, they're going to be more likely to friendly you. There's like a lot of things you can do meta in game and out of game that might like increase the chances or change that. So saying like there's nothing I can do when there are things you can try to do or that could work is a fallacy. It is a bit, I don't know if the word fallacy is going to help communicate with people in general. I could say like fallacious or I could say like irrational. I don't have a way to like ask you what you might understand, unfortunately. Like what might work in your circumstances or whatever. Fucking Juno! I fucked up. My bad, Juno. Yo, I'm not here. Go away. Go away, enemy Juno! So one way I provided value to my team that might not be visible is how long I fucking stalled that point. I let Juno die, though. They killed Juno. It's really good to them. It would have been good if I had paid more attention at Juno's positioning and was there to heal them and help save them from that Reinhardt. Oh well. Right, so there's control fallacy, there's oversimplification, there's also false dilemma, which is also a form of like black and white thinking. It's like either A or B, but this is an issue because there is often like C, D, E, F, G, H, G, K, and a bunch of other fucking things. Range. That sounds really cool. Yeah, whatever. Anyways, so it's very black and white thinking, like, hey, either A or B. Like, I could either do this or I could fucking feed. I could do this or we could lose, or I could do A, or like, I could do B, like, there's no other option, blah, 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 blah. And often there's a lot of other options, and they're just not considered, or they're not applicable. So, for example, someone might be like, I need help top, or we're going to lose. They could also leave top. I know I kind of like showing top laners a lot. That's because I was a top laner for like the majority of my League of Legends. That is the lane I have most commonly mained. There's a bit I mained jungle, there's a bit I mained AD carry, and there's a very large section I mained mid lane. That's like Season 1, Season 2, when like AD carry Annie was a thing, you know? So that was like way the fuck back in the day. Ooh! Oh, that Genji. Oh, fuck me. That was... Oof. He did good there. I fucking did not read that at all. So, false dilemmas have come up many times in my life where people will be like, hey, I could do this thing, or I could do this other, like, lesser evil, and I'm like, you don't just not do an evil? Like, what the fuck do you mean? Like, they're oversimplifying that issue to 2 issues rather than just 1. And they're putting focus on, like, some different aspect or options. I mean, the difference between oversimplification and, like, false dilemma is that one's about options and one's about, like, subtopics or issues or things. Fucking good job, Elizabeth. Alright, so that's generally what false dilemma is. You say it's either A or B, but it could be any number of other things or whatever the fuck. There's another issue of mind reading. This distortion is when you're like assuming someone else's like internal experience or knowledge, which is part of their experience. So, for example, if someone like takes the last cookie, you might be like, oh, they fucking hate me, they took the last cookie. But they might have actually just been hungry, or they might have thought it was theirs, or like left there for them or something like that. So you're like assuming an intention that isn't necessarily there. Another common thing when it comes to like mind reading is assuming you know or your interpretation is correct about what someone else is saying. So an example of mind reading in terms of like assuming your interpretation of someone else's communication is correct is that there is a person and I had communicated a thing to a different person and they were there and like heard and interpreted that, and then they went to talk to me about that topic and I was like, okay, well, these are my feelings on it, and I communicated it in a different way, and they're like, okay, but that's not what you said, and I'm like, well, okay. The issue was they had an interpretation of the first thing that was not correct, and then they assumed it was correct, and when I told them it wasn't correct, like I'm saying, this is my feeling on it, or this is the situation, they had a difficulty accepting that. No. In order to communicate with them well, it was probably on me to be like, okay, well, this is the case. But very often, I don't have the emotions to do things like that. Like, if I tell you it's X and you don't believe X, like, okay, just don't talk to me, like, fuck it, I don't care. It is what it is. I'm giving you the answer. If you don't accept it, I'm not gonna, like, try and convince you of it. Yeah, mind reading and communication, just assuming your interpretation is correct or you know what someone's trying to communicate by their communication. You have to, like, you don't have to assume in the conventional sense, but you kind of have to assume to some degree what someone else means. The issue is when you're told otherwise, like you express it and then they're like, well, no, that's not what I meant, like I'm trying to say like da 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 da, or that clarity or nuance or something, and you're like, well, no, that's not what you said. At that point, it's a different issue where you're appealing to like definition or something fucking. Heal them. I cannot heal them through that at all. Alright. No, I couldn't hold that for shit. I can't type. Oh, there's one more objective! We got the first one! Okay, that's good. The next distortion is going to be blame. This could be either blaming yourself or blaming others. And there's going to be many things to be aware of when it comes to blame. So there's like correlation and causality. There is also like causality and culpability. So the difference between like causation and chorality and then causation and culpability would be like for causation and chorality. If X goes up, Y goes up. That might be a correlation because it might not be X making Y go up. It could just be like there's a third thing that when that changes, both of those other aspects change. Or it's not that it would be a coincidence because that wouldn't be correlation. But causation would be like Y goes up because X goes up, not necessarily only. And then culpability would be there is a cause of something that doesn't necessarily make it like the fault or responsibility of that thing. So the way to express this would be like some things are like accidents or they're accidental, and then other things are like incidental. So some have intention, some don't, and some you would like blame someone and others you wouldn't. So an example of a difference between causality and culpability would be like if there is a trauma or something that you have, and someone else, you know, accidentally triggers that and brings it up and you get upset. It isn't like the fault of the other person to not have pre-accommodated that trauma because they didn't know, and it might not be, you know, reasonable to expect them to know. Whereas if someone does know and they bring it up in like an argument to try and like hurt you, they are very culpable. Like they should, quote unquote, should be quote unquote blamed. Like they are responsible for doing that. It is an intentional thing that they have done. It is malicious. It is very different than like thing happening to happen because it is an accident. There's also a difference between like culpability in terms of like intentionally maliciously hurting someone and like incidentally hurting someone. So for example, if I like, you know, a person and someone else likes me and I kiss the person that I like, the person that likes me might get hurt, and I might have known that it like could hurt them, and I might have chose to kiss the person I like anyways, and then the other person's feelings get hurt. Like that's incidental, not accidental, because I'm aware that that is a situation, but I'm not culpable because it's not like unreasonable for me to do that, to express my affection to that other person. This is sort of similar to like some real life example, so I want to stress it's not about that example. I don't think that person's ever going to see this video. This is an out of context or not in that particular context quote unquote example or hypothetical about it. In terms of blame, you have culpability, you have causality, you have correlation. There's also like accidental and incidental we've covered. And then the distortions of blame itself tend to be self-blame or other blame. It is when you attribute fault, but you ignore influence. So for example, if I wanted to self-blame, I would say, it is my fault we lost, you know, this game. But then I'm ignoring that there's 9 other players in that game that have an influence over how that game develops and happens. So it's not just me. That would be an oversimplification. And I am blaming myself in that scenario by oversimplifying it to like a singular person or like myself or an entity or a single phenomenon it's being oversimplified to. And to blame others would be like, oh, it's fucking Jeff's fault because he fucked up his ult, or it's Widow's fault because they're playing Widow and they're not playing like some other person or whatever the fuck have you. And then it's ignoring, again, that there's, you know, 9 other people, but also it's ignoring your potential influence on that situation. So for example, if I am, you know, a top laner and the bottom lane are just both constantly dying to the enemy bottom lane, or the middle or the jungler or whatever the fuck have you is constantly like doing a bad thing that's helping the enemy get stronger, or an undesirable thing in that game, it would be blaming others to be like, oh my god, like, fuck these people, like it's their fault we're losing, like they're feeding so hard, they're throwing so hard, da-da-da. Whereas I'm ignoring like it's potentially like in my influence currently to change that scenario, but also it was in my influence to prevent that scenario from happening that entire time, because there's no reason that I had to go top, there's no reason like I couldn't have gone mid or jungle or, you know, AD carry or support or whatever the fuck, or I couldn't have like helped other people either in terms of like supporting them emotionally or whatever the fuck, or I could have like played a more compatible character. Like if I was a top lane Shen, then I could have like ulted into these other lanes to help them a lot, maybe, or like there could have been other potential ways I could contribute or influence the situation. Whereas like accusing them of throwing is going to influence the situation, but in a strictly not strictly undesirable, but in a generally understood to be undesirable way, you're almost never going to increase your probability of winning by fucking raging at people for throwing. You are, you know, quote unquote throwing by accusing people of throwing. Alright, so that's blame in terms of himself, in terms of other. We went over mind reading, assuming others, you know, knowledge or their internal experience, or assuming your interpretation of their internal experience is correct. We went over false dilemmas, like it's A or B, but then there might be C or D or E or F or blah 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 blah. So it might be, oh, either I go and I feed top lane, or I just don't play the fucking game. And it's like, well, no, you could do a billion other things. Like, there's also like control fallacy, where you have all control, you have no control. It's like, this is completely on me. If I lose, you blame yourself. Or you can be like, I have no control over the situation. There's absolutely nothing I could do. It's probably not right. Nothing I could do. That's absolutely not right. There's also like oversimplification, the reduction to singulars. Shoulds are cultural or personal expectations that you hold others to as rules, or that you consider rules for external things. They're internal values, they're expectations you have of external things based on internal values. It's irrational, it is not very sensible, it is not generally productive to any form of like social bonds. Strawman. A strawman is basically when you're like mind reading or whatever the fuck, and you have an argument set up for someone else, but it's not necessarily the correct one. It could be intentional, it might not be intentional. The easiest way to avoid these are just like confirming point of views, you know, throughout conversations as you continue to talk and things like that. Those are like the listed ones. So we went over strawmans, when should, blame, self-other, went over mind reading, false dilemma, control fallacy, and oversimplification. There's a lot more distortions out there. Those are just the ones I have jot notes for, if those are the ones we went through in this video. If you like this form of content where I'm just like blindly playing the game, and sometimes I might comment on the game in the middle of a video, let me know. If you don't like it, you don't like it. Anyways, I hope some amount of that information is helpful in some way, or provides you like an awareness to improve yourself or anything like that. Otherwise, I hope it's at least entertaining. I hope you got something from it. If you didn't, it is what it is. I enjoyed making this so far, and we will see how I enjoy like the editing and watching the footage.